Ai, tiedä jotain saippua kuplia, tää huone täynnä. Mistähän ne on tullut? Niitä tullut tuolta ulkoa tullut. Semmosia 10 senttiä. Mitä? Niin pessä. Jumala pessä. Tekö pesse meidän tallo? Kuulitko? Jumala tekö pesse. Pesi meidän muni, kuulitko? Jumala pesi meidän muni. Jumala ei muni meidän pesi, vaan pesi meidän muni. Monetakaan näet alkanut jääkiekkokisaa? Onko ne jo alkanut? Mitä? Ää. Ää. Onko tää tuore mehu? Entä appelsiini? Joo, siis on vähän, ettei keripukki tule. Keripukki. Keripukki kun iskee, niin minkälainen sekki. Keripukkissa. Onko ne appelsiinituotteet? Öö. Mene nukahto. Kuulitko? No eikö tuossa appelsiini ensin? Sitten piristy, vaikka sulla sippelsiini. Sippelsiini. Mulla on vähän nenää, et vinos. Mulla on nenää vinos. Suuta on lukittu. Tuo suuta on lukittu. Sitä mä asun. No kosa se... Tää... Appelsiini. Mites mehua, kun sä tuot se appelsi? No pois se appelsi nyt ekaan.
Mehu on tuota, se ei ole oikein imeilee.
Eikö oo imeillä? No passi siihen se appelsi, kyllä se sopii. Anna nyt olla siinä, älä ruppee niitä siitä. Märätkäät. Niin, no pitää sellaisesti märkyyttä lisäät joka paikka. No minäpä nyt kierrättää kuvaruun sinne päin, että sinusta tulee YouTube-tähti. Tähti on syttynyt. No, pahan se on viikkiin,
Ovikin.
kun on tähti, ketä sytty.
Tämä on tuolla ovilukko ja pissiokko.
Tähti on sytty.
Pissiokko.
Onko tähti sytty? Mikäs? Lusikka siis. Mulikka. Niissä on montako appelsia. Perihirmuta. Montako appelsiinia tässä on? No pitäis vähän pienempiksi osiksua.
Jäi niitä oikein kato, kun mulla on ne joudun niittämään neljän.
Paha.
Tuota, jos
No, paha on kiinni. Kyllä minä ossun, kato.
oot sinne.
No painu ne paskalaput pois.
Niin.
Läpi päiväni. Siis ne,
Räpälaput.
ne. Laita pois. Mihinkä se nyt hävisi? No eikö tule tänne?
En minä niitä rupea pienentämään.
No ei, mutta istu tuohon katotta, kun eikö se jääkikkopelit ala? Eikö se MM-kisat ala tästä? Tää?
Kohta me alkaa ovi.
Mikä on?
Kaanit ja kaanit.
Aha. Vain. Kaanit.
Kaanit.
Niin ne on. Meillä vaan tuo televisio alkaa. Eikö? Entäs tää valo miten hyvä?
On siellä tuolla semmonen pienempi televisio. Mitä se on?
Ei mölläkö, se on Juisen Leskisen televisio. Kuulitko? Juisen TV.
Otetaan Juisen tietien näkyy.
Juisen entinen TV. No semmoista se veljensä kanssa kahta sillä mökissä, mörskässä Juankossa.
Niin.
Siitähän on valokuvia olemassa.
On.
Oho. Siellä ne telekkaria kahdesta kahtomat. Pienessä mökissä. Kato siinä, missä syntynyt Juisa. Siinähän se veli, onko se joku opettaja, vai mikä siitä tuli sitten. Sitä Juisen veljestä.
Joo.
Ihan tavallinen jätkähän se Juise on.
Niin.
Loppujen lopuksi ihan tavallinen jätkä. Ei se sen kummempi. Siellä on yksi appelsiinin siemenkin.
Onko sinne?
Jollekin minä hein, onko se siellä? Se suottaa siellä tuolin alla jossain olla likellä. Niin, no siitä kasvaa appelsiini.
Ne ruppee puu kasvamaan ja minä koton puuoksalla sitten.
Appelsiinipuu.
Minä laulan sitten, minä oksalla ylimmällä.
Ylimälli. Ylimälli. Mälliksi sanovat aikoinaan. Arvo ketään. Karhusen makea oli mälli. Artturi sanoi aina makeet. Mälli, oh mälli. Irlantilaista, oh mälli. Oh mälli. Valoa kanssa. Valoa kanssa, joka pimeydessä vaeltaa. Elää vailla pimeydessä. Tule valoon sieltä. Amarillo, kuulit. Tule Amarillo. Amarillo syömään hampurilaisia. Tai juomaan kaktusviinaa. No elää nyt meni pilalle. Nyt sinä, mitenkä sinä, sormenko sinä panitsi? Se on heti sormeen työntämässä joka. Sormeen joka paikka. Tää. Mitä? Elähän ota poika sormet pois. Otahan sormet pois. Valot pyöräilee. Sano mulle, että striimailija valot pois. Liiraili. Ai liiraili. Elä liira. Tää. Mitä? Aha. Mitenkäs tässä? Onko tää hyvin älykäs tää vitun puhelin saat? Tai tämä liian älykäs. Onko? Mites tää niin älykäs? No mitenkä se nyt hävisi? Tuossa mykistä mikrofoni. Niin nyt se tässä ei sitä vaan, sitäkö se tuo valohomma kokonaan. Turpeen. Tää. Kyllä taisittiin tehdä. Mykistä mikrofoni. Tää. Virtoo. Waterweed. No mihinkäs tästä nyt hävisi sitten se Valohommas koko. Ihan käsittää. Tanssia. Nytkö on tanssia käynnissä? Ollaanko sitä nyt humalassa? Tämmöiset, kun se humalassa näyttää maailma. Vähän kaksoiskuvia ja värit vähän miten sattuu. Valkeana kuin haamu. Joka aamu valkeana kuin haamu. Good. Silver Grace. Silver Grace. Mikäs tää yksi on? Seeppiä. Dokumentit on tämmöisiä. Vankiladokumenttissa. No minäpä haastattelen itseni Kakkolan potiin, eikä vankia. No miltä tässä tuntuu olla Kakkolassa siellä takapenkillä. Siellä toisella Kakkolan vankisiivekkeessä oleva henkilö.
Miltä tuntuu Kakolassa?
Ootteko te Kakkolan vanki?
Ei ole kuin
Kikolan vanki. Ai te olette Kikolassa, ette Kakkolassa. No menkää Kakkolaan sitten, kun kerran olette jo Kikolaan päässeet.
Sitten mennään siinä vähän myöhemmin Kakkolaan.
Menkää yöksi Kakkolaan. Mennään yöksi Kakkolaan. Yöksi. Kun on vähän huono olo, niin yöksi Kakkolaan. Vai semmoista, oletteko te kenties? Mikäs tää on? Mikä tää? Aamun koite. Aamun koite lukee tuossa. Nyt on aamun koite selvästi, hei. Nyt on aamun koite. Täällä on illan koitus interruptus, hei. Aamulla on koitus interruptus. Koiterruptus. Ruptus, hei. Rupsu taitaa. Vai rapsut tuli rupsu. Rapsut tuli rupsuttamisesta, hei. Elää rapsuta, nyt alkaa rupsuja tulla. Joo, katossa. Mikä se siimalla siis kulmassa, onko siinä joku? Mikä siis? On. Ei, kun joku heijasta. Mikä niin? Vai onko se likatäplä tuossa? En mä jää. Ei tai ollut likatäplä. Siinä on joku. Ei vapo. Tai olla olemassa toisaalta. Ensin.
Kai jos se on kakkoa.
Niin kakko, rehellistä kakko.
Niin.
Joo,
Ne on syönyt kakkoa.
joo. Se voi kakko.
Minähän on porilainen, kun ne rupes kakosta puhumaan. Minä sanoin, no me Savossa ei kyllä ole minulla syöty kakkoa.
Niin. Ei varmaan.
Nee. Kyllä sitä monta kertaa sai naurata. Oli vähän niinku erilaisia nimikkeitä.
No en usko, että kovin monta kertaa. Otan.
2 tai 6 kertaa.
No 2 tai 3 veikko. Realisti pitää olla.
Ei pienillä valitti.
Realisti. Siis realistisista, mikä se on? Ei rasisti, vaan realistis. Kommunistinen, mikä se on? Kommunistinen. Mikä vasisti, ei kun mikä se on? Eikö se yksi juttu? Se realismi juttu. Kommari. Kommari, pommari. Siimarit, sammarit, kummarit ja pipo. Siimarit, sammarit, kummarit ja pipo. Ootko sä nähnyt tän? Apinani pienen ja lystikään, joo. Herra tossa vainen se oppi nimeltään. Kuulitko? Herra tossa, Peppi on pitkään tullut tossa. Sula hopsula hei, sula hopsansa. Peppi on pitkään hopsu, eiku topsu, sula sop 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 sopsa. Ootko sä nähnyt tän apinani pienen ja lystikään? Joo. Herra tossa vaiten se oppi nimeltään.
Meillä on herra tuossa vainen.
Tussa vai? Joo. Mä oon. Joo. Noinkohan oli. Noinkohan oli. En oo ihan varma.
Minä osaan varmaan.
Aha. Taitaa olla liian varma. Liika varmasta, että sun. Onko liikaa varpata? Liika varma.
Ei ole tasanut. Onnella.
Tasa on käynyt onnellaan. Vai.
Mistä se johtuu muuten, kun kuuluu aina joskus sellaisia
Mikä ihme?
ihmeellisiä juttuja ihmeellisiä?
Mitä ihmeellisiä juttuja?
Niin, että joku saa vaikka 3 kättä.
Jaa. Ja jos se Jumala mieli. Mieriikys. Ää.
Ja onhan siinä elukoistakin aina vähän semmoisia poikia.
Tää elukos.
Eläimissä.
No onko siinä koe-eläkeksuksessa semmos?
No ei siinä nyt ainakaan pahempia välineitä. Kyllä siinä mikähän se laji tuli, kyllä minä muistelen joku oli.
No mikä se on se kuusvarpainen kissa? Sisikäs se on.
Niin se kai.
Vai oli. Tuota minä ei kyllä ymmärrä. Että nyt tähän ei saa sitä, tätä valota. Ei. Se menee mulle yli.
Eikö sinä se sait sinne?
Ei, kun se vaan olisi. Mikähän tässä? Nyt se.
Greetings. We are the Arch-Orion Council. We are pleased to connect with all.
Sattuu. Lähetyskäynnissä. Oi vittu. Kahdeksan millimetriä. Säde. Glamour unelma. Tanssiast kuplat. Norma. No se. Vanha. Vasesu.
Sorry. Sorry. Yes.
Vittu. Sala. Ai, missä se on? Joko se jääkiekkomanös? Onko? Aa. Tuleeko ne? Nääkö on rupes väsyttämään perkele, kun ne nuo Saamerin työläiset tuossa jurrasti koko päivää. Uuvuttivat, ne turhautti, kato ne jarru iski päällä. Yhteiskunnan työjarrut on töissä.
Niin,
Ne työjarrut kädessä on.
kyllähän leikkaa.
No en nyt sykkää.
Palko tullut?
Vaan enää vessan pönttöön. Joo. Onko sitä makkaraa? Et vessapaperi? Käykö se siinä kaapassa, Ramu? Kaapassa. Vaikka lupas käy. Joo. Nuo on vaan tuossa nuo työmiehet, työjarrut tuossa, ne ihmisiä aiheuttivat. Ihmisiä aiheuttivat. Ramityyty. Sitä ottaa.
No pannaanko
Minäpä.
Anna vaan. Katsotaan joku.
Ei mitään.
Näkyy peli.
No näkyy. Näkyy pelit. Näkyy pelit. Eikö siellä joku maina hei.
On vaakot täällä kuule immi.
On varmasti.
to send American astronauts not to the space station. That's going to be handled by people like Elon Musk and others like even Branson someday. But this is going to go back to the moon. The only thing that is missing, because all the pieces are on the board, the only thing missing is gas in the car, which in Washington, of course, is money. How in an era of incredible, financial extremists, with budget slashing, with deficits on the minds of everybody and the lips of every news guy, with headlines talking about, oh, we're spending too much money, we got to cut back. How is NASA ever going to get the necessary funds to make this happen? That's where we come to part 2. Because if what I think is going to happens in the next 6 months, and you're going to see a lot of data in the second half that shows you that it's almost now unstoppable, then this vision, which was Sir Arthur C. Clarke's and Stanley Kubrick's vision of a human base in a crater called Clavius on the southern hemisphere of the moon, facing the Earth, every full moon night you can look up, and with an even small pair of binoculars or telescope, you can see Clavius. And from there, the moon, or rather the Earth, is just hovering over the horizon. Why did Arthur, of all things, put in both the novel and with Stanley in the film in 2001, this incredibly predictive classic film, as you're going to see? Why did he put this base at Clavius in the southern hemisphere of the moon? Well, here's a picture. This is not a NASA picture. This is not an official shot. This is done by a gentleman named Damien Peach, who is a UK countryman of yours. Lives somewhere down south of it, I believe. He goes to the Bahamas, to Barbados, to clear air, and he photographs the planets and the moon with stunning resolution and clarity with a telescope which is no bigger than a 14-inch mirror. And he does this routinely, and he posts his images, he and many other high-end amateurs all around the world, and they are now looking, as I report in Dark Mission, in the revised edition, they are looking at the moon, and they are photographing ruins on the moon. These are actual artificial structures, ancient structures, all around Clavius. Just look at the geometry. The key to finding ruins all over the solar system, as I'm going to show you in part 2, is the geometry that radiates into space through the optical imagery, announces its presence to the sky, because nature does not do this incredible honeycomb-like geometry for mile after mile. These look like ancient abandoned apartment complexes sitting on the hills outside San Francisco, and they're about the same scale. The details of this are, of course, reported in Dark Mission, including actual photographs, other photographs taken by Peach and some of these other amateurs. I used the old Cronkite rule of thumb. Don't take one source, don't take two sources, get 3 independent sources. So I picked 3 independent amateur astronomers who I'm not even sure know each other. And I printed their independent, separate imagery of ruins on the moon. These ruins are in the northern hemisphere that can be photographed from Earth. And now, of course, more and more amateurs are able to do this all over the globe. And it's only a matter of time until somewhere, somehow, the mainstream press pick up on this and they say, oh my gosh. And they fund even bigger telescopes to do it for the big guys, the real guys, the network guys. The clock is ticking. Well, as part of this secret agenda that I believe Obama is quietly, with that legislation, put on track, there are also plans to go to Mars. Now, Mars is interesting because, of course, a certain guy wrote a book about Mars, and there's all kinds of ruins on Mars. Would you like to see something you've never seen anywhere else before that is unmistakably an actual ruin on Mars? Here it is. This is a 2,000-foot long ship, the size of a big super tanker here on Earth, scale up just a little bit. Notice this weird slide mark. This thing, in the great catastrophe, the flood on Mars, that sloshed the oceans, all of this is in Dark Mission, so you can read about the details. This is not a mesa. This is not a butte. This is not a mountain, because mountains don't slide. They don't slide for 10,000 feet across the surface. We're coming ass end first, because that's where the engines are, and that's the heaviest part. The consistency of this, when I showed Nori years ago this photograph, he jumped out of his chair. This is a comparison of some of the details on a Mars Surveyor image with the famed QE2. You can actually see decking, you can see rounded hull plating, you can see fantail, you can see the bow broken off. It turns out, I didn't know this, that when ships founder at sea and they sink, in many, many, many cases, the bow, because that's a weak point, breaks off and lies on the seafloor, excuse me, right next to the ship. That's what we see here. The bow broke off in the enormous cataclysm that befell Mars and sloshed the oceans. And whatever was on here, whoever was on here, obviously did not make it. But the ship survived. Now, we've tried to get NASA, excuse me, to give us much higher resolution imagery from our reconnaissance orbiter. I've tried, certain people like Keith Laney have tried. NASA will not even respond to our emails. They refuse to take a high-res image, which would show things on the order of this water bottle, as opposed to the smallest things which are on the order of the size of this auditorium on this ship. Gosh, I wonder why. Which brings us, of course, back to the uncertain future. How do we make that future not uncertain? How do we create certainty out of uncertainty? How do we do again what John Kennedy was able to do at Rice University when he said and proclaimed for all the world to hear, in a different era, a different time, and a different people, we choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard, because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept and we are unwilling to postpone, and one in which we intend to win, and the others too. In that vein, again, a different era, a different time, a different people. This president, a few months ago, enunciated that he wants to send astronauts to an asteroid. Why perchance an asteroid? Well, you're going to find out. These are the asteroids. Bits of rock and dust and chunks and boogie bits and all that floating around between the orbit of Mars and Jupiter. There are huge debates as to whether asteroids are planets that don't get together, or in fact planets that in fact were blown apart. A planet that exploded. The late Tom Van Flandern, my friend and colleague, was of the mind that the planet 5, the missing planet in the solar system, was the origin of this trail of rubble and rocks and debris that we call the asteroid belt. The evidence is really overwhelming that that model, which we made some contributions to in terms of how Mars fits into the scenario, because Mars, it turns out, was probably a moon of that exploded planet. If you want to understand some of the dynamics of the politics behind this, read the work of Dr. Joseph Farrell. I commend strongly his whole series on a cosmic interplanetary war, because whatever blew this sucker up appeared to be people doing really dumb and stupid things with toys they should never have been allowed to play with. They blew it up themselves, if we are right. Why does Obama want to send the Orion spacecraft with a service module and gear and all kinds of equipment that would allow astronauts to survive for several months in deep interplanetary space? Why does he want to rendezvous with and land on an asteroid? Because it turns out the asteroids are probably the key to blowing the doors off the cover-up at NASA for the last 30 plus years, and in fact, ushering in real physical disclosure, which is, as I'm talking tonight here in Leeds, ongoing out in space, about 2.5 times as far away as we orbit from the sun. On an unmanned mission, the Dawn mission, with an ion-powered spacecraft that is visiting 2 of the main belt asteroids. First, for a year, orbiting Vesta, which is the second most massive asteroid known, almost a mini planet, a little world, as the NASA guys who've now seen the photographs are calling her. And then Ceres, which is the largest asteroid, which is technically not an asteroid anymore according to the IAU, but a dwarf planet. This one is about 330 miles across. This one is something like 500 miles across. And it is to these objects, first this one now, and then in a few years with the ion-powered spacecraft to go into orbit around Ceres in 2015, 2016, just about the time that the heavy lift vehicle, the Orion spacecraft, and a new manned human mission to asteroids comes into fruition, will all arrive synchronously together in the politics of NASA. So what do we see at these asteroids? This, by the way, is a comparison of size. Here's the moon, here's the Earth, 8,000 miles, 2,000 miles, 330 miles, 500 miles. This is their relative size. Everybody thinks that NASA is visiting a rock. Oh, no. Whatever Vesta is, it is not a rock. This is a schematic artist conception of the spacecraft. 65-foot-long solar panels take in sunlight, convert to electricity, and propel this spacecraft through space with something that back in Gene's day, back in the first season of Star Trek, remember when Scotty was oogling and eyeing about ion propulsion? Like it was something, I mean, come on, the warp drive was much cooler than ion propulsion even then, but for a mainstream audience, it sounded really cool, so of course scriptwriters said, oh, ion propulsion. Now this mission, if it was not for ion propulsion, would not exist, because they were able to, by remote control, put this little Dawn spacecraft, because it's the panels that are this big, the actual spacecraft is about the size of a car, into orbit around Vesta, and it's been there now for several weeks, since January 16th. Oh yes, January 16th. What date is that? That's the date that Apollo 11 was launched with Neil and Buzz and Mike Collins aboard in 1969 for her first human mission to the moon, to land and return. NASA loves anniversary dates, particularly symbolic and ritual dates. This is a schematic showing the spacecraft, showing the various instrumentation, the cameras and the other gadgets and the star trackers and the antenna and the solar panels. Again, the panels provide the electricity to fuel, to power the engine, which actually spurts out a beam of high-velocity ions and creates thrust. This is the multi-year mission orbit showing as it leaves Earth and winds around the solar system, rendezvous with Mars, got a gravity assist to toss it further out. Because the asteroids aren't all in the same plane as the planets, changing planes in orbit is very expensive in terms of fuel and velocity. So they were able to use Mars as a kind of a slingshot effect to kick Dawn into a higher inclination orbit so ultimately it could rendezvous with Vesta on the 16th a few weeks ago. This is now the first picture that they beamed back. Hidden behind this little occulting disk, a few pixels across, because you're millions of miles away, is Vesta out there in the dark with the navigation camera taking star sights, which is how they actually do the last tweaks on the orbit and hone in on their target, because even though these objects have been around for hundreds of years in terms of astronomical knowledge, their orbits are not that well defined, certainly to get a spacecraft to and from, so they use actual, what they call optical navigation to navigate the last few million miles. This is now a series of approach shots. Vesta is not a ball. It's not spherical. In fact, as you're going to see, it has the most remarkable shape, but it's a symmetrical shape. And the shape alone is telling us something pretty amazing. Closer shot now, taken a few weeks ago as it approached. This is a comparison between the dawn image of Vesta as it closed in, and the best Hubble telescope picture from, I think it was 1997 when they took this. This is what we saw then, this is what we saw a few weeks ago, and this, of course, is what we saw even sooner, or more recently. Now you can begin to see that there is something unusual. There is a huge mountain protuberance thing in the southern hemisphere lying right across the South Pole. Vesta rotates like this. You're looking at it kind of up at an angle. The North Pole is on the other side. It's like a flattened hamburger bun. And it spins like this every 5 hours and 20 minutes. Very rapidly. Very rapidly. Much more rapidly than the Earth, for instance. But it's got this funny thing at the pole. And that funny thing, this, by the way, is now a computer model from the Hubble data showing the axis and showing the rotation orientation. And this funny mountain is right here, very close to the axis of the South Pole. The mainstream guys think this was a huge impact and a central peak, which occurs on the moon and other bodies in the solar system because of what are called impact dynamics. I don't think that's the explanation of this thing at all. At all. Either its shape, the placement, or some of the things you're about to see. Because as you get closer, this is now a closer shot, here's that weird mountain, and you can begin to see some detail. Yes, there are some craters, but there are also these funny lines. And the closer you get, or the more you basically sharpen the image. Let me go back and forth, rock this a bit. This is the NASA view. This is what we did by enhancing it just a tad. You can begin to see now patterns. And then, if you do this, you see some astonishing geometric patterns, particularly in this one quadrant, and you see what seem to be mile after mile after mile of large-scale honeycombing. Remember, this little world, 300 miles across, the size of Connecticut, if you don't invoke really exotic models like aluminum-26, radioactive isotope, decaying furiously, giving heat so that you'll have all kinds of internal geological activity, but geology doesn't create regular honeycomb-type patterns. However, if the southern hemisphere had been exposed to a blast of the exploding planet, and the shrapnel, the sandblasting, the sheer debris, trillions and trillions of tons of fine material blowing past this southern hemisphere at kilometers per second, scouring off miles and miles of the material on the surface, leaving exposed an understructure of some kind that literally was built on top of whatever the natural body was. This kind of regular geometry would kind of be what you should see. That's a model which we can test. So as they got closer, I'm looking now, here's that big, huge thing sticking in. You can see the size of it compared to the shadow. These are craters, impact craters, and the background luminations getting closer. You can now see that there's much more detail visible. We rotate, when you're looking for this kind of geometry, it's always important if you have a computer and you take these images in from NASA, you download them, that you basically rotate the image. Because the eye-brain combination sees this kind of geometry best if it's straight up and down or left and right. At an angle, it's not easy to see. So either tilt your head or tilt the picture in your computer so you see from all different directions, 360 degrees landscape, so you can see incipient geometry and the real stuff will pop out. So by rotating this around, look now at this, what we call orthogonal patterns. Left and right and up and down. Boxes, lines, right angles, nested geometry, over and over and over and over again. And the scale of this is humongous. That's telling us some pretty amazing things, either in the natural model or in the artificial model. And if you looked at the press conference that NASA held the other day, all the scientists who seemed to me to be kind of talking in code, kept saying things like, "This is unbelievable. This is totally unexpected. We haven't seen this before. We didn't think it was a good..." They're saying all the things you'd say if, in fact, it's what I think it is. You're going to see more details in a moment. But they're doing it very carefully because it's not yet time to talk about what's really there. They are going to want to take pictures from as low and as close as possible. And in this next year, the current orbit is about 1,700 miles above the surface. Remember, the object is 300 miles across. You're 1,700 miles away, which is half the width of the United States, give or take. This image, by the way, was taken from about 6,000 miles away, I think. The final mapping orbit is going to be 100 miles, which means the pictures are going to be 100 times bigger. I'm sorry, this was 10,000 miles. 100 times bigger. Think of this object from here to here, and then extend it that away 50 times, and that away 50 times, and that's the level of detail you're going to see on the final shots. And you can bet your dollars to Navy beans that if they see stuff that's really got to have better resolution, remember, this is a little airless world. There's no atmosphere, no friction, which means you can bring this sucker, Dawn, with the ion engine, right down like 10 miles, 5 miles, once you get the gravity field mapped so that you don't wind up, as it rotates, you wind up hitting a mountain or whatever they're called. That is going to be the kind of safety precaution, not to get too close because you don't want to end the mission catastrophically. But if they see what we now believe they're going to see and are already seeing, that's why at the press conference they kept saying, well, we really can't say anything because we need better pictures. We need higher resolution pictures. Well, they damn well do, because what they're seeing is something they never expected. Remember, our model is that most of the system is honest. Most of NASA does not know what is out there because they've been kept from knowing. The number of people that actually have looked at real ruins and know what they're seeing is a tiny handful of people in an organization of 20,000 folks, give or take, that work for NASA and all the contractors that work for Lockheed and Boeing and the other big aerospace companies. You can keep this data really, really, really tightly controlled because remember, there's no people out there able to get on their cell phones and say, "Oh my God, Drew, look at this." It's a robot. It tells you exactly you can tell it what to do and tell it who not to talk to. So that unless you give the pictures out to everybody, and that's what makes this really interesting, because for the first time in all the time that I've been looking at NASA data, this kind of regular, unvarnished, raw imagery showing geometry, redundant rectilinear geometry on the surface of a world like this is being shown to everybody simultaneously. There's no airbrushing, they're not censoring, they're not keeping it in a drawer, they're just not talking about it yet. And we live in a culture, and I use that term very loosely, covering the entire planet, we live in a culture where people don't know how to think for themselves. A lot of people look at this and they will not see what I'm describing. Not only are they conceptually unable to think about it as being real, but physiologically, there was a Boeing study many years ago that Barrett turned me on to because he worked in the CAD program designing airplanes, and what they do when they hired various people at Boeing is they would give them tests. Who can see three-dimensional stringers and rebar and airplane parts without a computer so that they know how to actually build an airplane without putting it together wrong? It's like an erector set. Turned out from their studies that about a third of the population can see this type of geometry without any training at all. You just look at it, bingo, and you can see it. About a third can be trained, can be taught to see this geometry. And a third can't. I was going to use another term, but I'll be kind. I won't, because it's not their fault. They just can't see it. Now you add to that the physiological and psychological idea that this is impossible, that there can be nothing there like I've been talking about for decades, and that third is actually more like half. So half the population start right away with not only not being able to see it, but they don't want to see it. They can't see it. Mentally, they're unprepared to see it. They don't want it to be there. It will disturb their world too much, and they just want it to go away. But that leaves the other half that either can see it or will be willing to see it, provided someone shows them how. Moving on. This is now closer. look at this. I mean, you do not get this kind of box-like formation in natural geology anywhere on Earth or in the solar system. The physics of how you make this stuff is not there. It simply is not there. And you can't wave your arm and say, oh, it's another planet, that anything goes. No, it doesn't. If you're taking that position, you have to show a process for how to get from here to there. You have to show an actual physics for how that kind of wondrous geometry arises naturally. And there is no such model anywhere in any university or textbook or tome or research paper or study anywhere on Earth. Certainly on a scale of 300 plus miles. Now remember, if I'm right, we're looking at the base of an object which has all kinds of structural I-beams and rebar and supports, and the surface was blasted away, revealing the huge mega-sized guts that keep this as an orbiting station. Vesta has been in this model modified by a super civilization that Pharaoh and I and others have called a Type 2 civilization, which comes from the work of a brilliant Russian named Kardashev, borrowed loosely by Michio Kaku on Art Bell many, many years ago, and talked about as Kaku's idea. He actually borrowed it from Kardashev, and Kardashev listed 3 levels of civilization that he expected, this back in the 60s, that we might encounter someday, or at least encounter their works, back when even mainstream guys were kind of optimistic. One was Type 1. We're about a Type 0.7. Type 1 is defined as a civilization which controls the energies of its entire planet. A Type 2 is a civilization that controls the energies of its entire star, meaning it can use those energies to remake its entire solar system, and that, in our model, in a nutshell, is what we think we've been seeing over the last several decades. Evidence from all NASA's manned and unmanned missions, going from the moon to Mars, to the satellites of Jupiter, out to the rings of Saturn, and even at Neptune, we see evidence of artificial tinkering and restructuring by a super Type 2 civilization that did something absolutely horrible to itself and convulsed itself in a monstrous civil war, unless it was invaded, and I frankly think it may have been a civil war. Joseph Errol and I have this argument all the time. And all we're now left with is the ruins of our great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmothers and grandfathers in something incredibly stupid they did one day, like when Oppenheimer was testing the atomic bomb in the American Southwest millions of years later, and the physicists were arguing with each other, well, is it going to ignite the atmosphere and burn us all to death, or is it not? And they decided, come on, let's take a chance. And that's what they did. They did not know. They did not have the physics and the calculations to know. They simply bet that it wouldn't happen. And it didn't. Unless it did, and we're all dead, and we're living this very bizarre dream, which sometimes watching CNN, watching what's going on in the White House in Washington these days, I really wonder, are we alive, or is this, Robin talks about, Saturday Night Live all the time. We're living a Saturday Night Live nightmare. And the only thing that's going to change it, I believe, is something like this that hits everybody between the eyes, because it cannot be ignored and denied anymore. If I'm right, you're going to see in a couple of minutes now, that clock is ticking. Even now in Washington, lights are burning and people are saying, holy cow, because most of the honest folks are as stunned as some of you are going to be as you see the next set of pictures with what's there, and which is not being covered up, because you've got to bring the mainstream, the honest people, into the enclave, into the conversation before we can politically take the next step. This type of geometry on this scale says, A, we're ants. B, we know nothing. C, they were destroyed. And D, whoever did it might still be out there. And can you imagine how they are feeling at the Pentagon tonight? Particularly with Elanine on the way. Oh, I mentioned Elanine. Something is coming, as you will see. So we go closer, You see more and more of this rectilinearity. Now, there are several versions of this data. This is a photograph that was taken, let me go here, all right? That was taken a few hours later. Remember, this thing rotates every 5 hours, 20 minutes. And the sunlight changes constantly so that you can see different lighting patterns, and the geometry shows up. Lower incidence lighting, you get nice shadows, and you see these rectilinear patterns, grid-like patterns. Then they took an infrared shot, which was color-coded. So we're looking at color filter data, possibly indicative of chemistry, of material differences. This is the infrared on the right, this is the black and white on the left, and you can see that that mountain, whatever that thing is, has a different color, bluish, and then there's this very weird splotch. Again, you're looking almost straight up at the South Pole, and the asteroid or object or mini-planet rotates this way, 300 miles from here to here. Now we go closer. One of the guys at unmannedspaceflight.com, whose name is Euromike, actually he has another name and I forget what it is, but his code name is Euromike. What he did was he superimposed, he melded together in the computer the black and white shot with the infrared color shot. So you have high-res black and white underneath the composition differences, the materials of the color. And this is what you see. Now, human eye combinations see differences in geometry better in color than black and white. We can go closer, and you see this amazing rectilinear pattern over and over again, which example, particularly right in here. Look at all this delicate right angle stuff. This, I now believe, is a monstrous ruin of what used to be a pyramidal structure. I've had some guys on Facebook actually claiming they recognize that it looks vaguely Incan or Aztec to them. That could or could not be true because there's cultural, lineage descendants that's possible. There's only certain ways to make a structure and you replicate that way again and again and again. Or there's a cultural frame, a religious frame, a way of looking at the universe that makes a certain structure. The point is, it was Sagan who set the tone and tone of this conversation. He said, this was back in Cosmos, back in 71, intelligent life on Earth first manifests itself in the geometric regularity of its constructions. If you have regular geometry, you have intelligence. Nature on this scale does not, has never, and cannot, given the physics that we think we know. Now you can say, okay, there's another physics. Well, but now what you've done is you've violated the rules of the game. Because what NASA does, what the geologists do at NASA when they're looking at a new planet for the first time, they take all the laws of physics that they've learned here on Earth and they apply them to this new world. Why is it only honest to do it in terms of natural processes, but it's dishonest to do it in terms of us? We're part of the universe. We're part of the fabric of the environment, of nature, of reality, 3D reality. Why would we draw the line between natural things and artificial things? Well, it's an artificial line. It's a political fabrication. We're getting to the end of part 1 here, so hang in there for another 2 minutes. How you look at this is through these kinds of eyes. This is something, all right? I'm not going to tell you what it is. How many can see what it is? And how many think that it might just be a nice bunch of holes punctured by meteorites on some other world? I'll call your attention to this stuff here, these guys here. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sharpen the image because this, in fact, is a classic artificial structure in New Mexico called Pueblo Bonito in New Mexico, just a few miles from where Robin and I live. And the holes are kivas, they're ceremonial centers. The living apartments are over here. Let me rock back. You can still see the geometry, but unless you're trained, you understand what you'd be looking for if you had better imagery, you might miss it. But in fact, it's artificial, and now, of course, we can go to color. We have the color, and bingo, you see vegetation, you see roads, you see... In other words, geometry is the indicator of intelligent life anywhere in the universe. Because intelligence that we know by the rules of the game that we can extrapolate, produces regular geometry, and nature does not. Particularly, little boxes on the hillside, little boxes full of ticky-tacky. Remember that one? Back to here. You see that kind of regular geometry. It's fuzzy. It's desperately fuzzy. You yearn for a better picture. Well, here's another example. This is a picture of something. I'll give you a hint. It's in a desert here on Earth. We get better data. Bingo. Now you can see its walls, its ruined walls, it's submerged under sand walls. This is in Egypt, the deserts of Egypt. This is what it looks like in low res, but you can still see that kind of rectilinear geometry. That is your clue. Be suspicious. Demand better data. And lo and behold, we get it. Many things can happen. Well, the VESTA mission is going to wind down, spiral down over the next several weeks in this kind of curve to get into these three mapping positions, 700 miles, 500 miles, and about 100 miles. These are the final orbits that it will position itself in, taking different data at different distances. This is a composite of images taken as they drifted in toward orbit. You can see how the resolution got better and better. You're coming up under the South Pole, so this thing, pyramid, mountain, whatever, and this whole exposed southern hemisphere is not only visible, but it now becomes more and more of a crescent as they went around behind the planet and came back down in this polar orbit a few days ago at around 3,000 miles and gave us this amazing image. Look at the grooves, which are symmetrical with the rotation axis. What could do that? This is now an enhanced version. Then what we do is we flip it, because remember, looking at geometry, you want to look at different angles and different directions, because your eye will see the geometry up and down and left and right a lot easier than any other configuration. Now we're taking a close-up of this region. And we're going to zoom in. Look at all that regular geometry. Now, initially when you look at it, it's confusing. You have to actually live with this stuff for hours. Your eye has to get used to patterns. It has to see the shape of random craters like this one here from this very regular honey. This is layered, by the way. It's not a flat surface. It's multiple layers. Eroded by time, eroded by micrometeorites, eroded by abrasion. Look at the stunning regular patterns. These are not holes punched by meteors hitting it from outside. This is an intrinsic, I could lay this side by side as I will in a minute, with city patterns here on Earth, and you cannot, unless you know what you're looking at, tell the difference. Here's another section I'm going to show you. This is the final close-up of that. Look at and again, it's fuzzy and soft because it's been abraded and eroded. But a trained eye knows instantly that this kind of pattern, look at the right angles here. Look at the right angles here. Who makes rectangular craters with little rectangles and lattice beams and 3D with shadows? Even this huge crater was an impact into an artificial lattice-like surface. All right, this is one of my favorites. Here's the area we're going to look at. Notice these guys right here. They're all in a row. They're rectangular. They're eroded. There's another area here which has amazing, there's geometry all over here. This isn't a landscape where you got a building and then flat land and then another building. This is a constructed surface. It reminds me, if anybody is a fan of Isaac Asimov and his Foundation series, he talks about Trantor, the planet at the center of the galaxy that rules the galactic empire. He wrote this in the 50s. We're looking at replications of Trantor. What was Isaac trying to tell us? We're almost at the end of part one. Here's closer. Look at the geometry here. Look at these. They're all arrayed in a line, and you've got an impact. Here's an impact. See, it's round. It's actually, here's another impact. These aren't impacts. These are squares arrayed in a line parallel to this line of stuff. And this is again Carl's maxim. Look for the geometry and you will be rewarded with this comparison. This is on Vesta. This is on the Sazi ruins, not far from where Robin and I live. And look at how erosion of rectangular walls is identical morphologically between something which is a few hundred feet across here and something here which is who were these people? And are they potentially a source of the rumors and mythologies and descriptions in the Bible of giants in those days? That's a whole other discussion. This now is the various visions of Vesta in terms of the approach imagery, showing where some of these features are located. Here's now a final shot showing this region. We've rotated it around again. It is honeycombed. The surface is honeycombed, and the closer you get, the more geometry you can see, the more regular lattice-type geometry. I mean, look at the lattice work over here. Natural surfaces do not look like this. You can see it's almost fractal. You know how you have large-scale stuff, and then it gets smaller scale, smaller scale, smaller scale, like it replicates down and down and down. We can speculate till the cows come home as to what we're looking at, but until we actually land, we're not going to know. And maybe we'll know a lot more in terms of artificial models. Here, look at these right angles. Here's another one. Here's a whole bunch of wonderful right angles. Box-like forms. Nature does not create these. Look at this is walls. You have parallel walls, which are the same width that go on for thousands of feet. And moving down, you can see more structure and detail in here. Again, the more you linger with these images on the computer, the more and easier it becomes to see the patterns over and over again. There are very few discrete forms that show up on this bashed and battered world. We're going to rotate it around now and show you one last thing right here. All right? This one. What in the world is this? We rotate it around. Here's more grid-like patterns next to it. Here it is, wide angle. We flip it. What in the world? It's got some kind of 3D multi-leaved shape. And then when we rotate it 180 degrees and zoom in, it seems like it has petals that are sitting over a circular area. Creators don't make this morphology. We're going to get photographs 100 times better in a matter of a few months. You can see, again, more geometry at the base with support structure. This is very eerily reminiscent of this. And the Dawn mission will tell us a lot more. These are the guys that are running the Dawn mission. This is the principal investigator. Here's the head of the camera. This guy's from UCLA, Berkeley. This guy's from Germany. This is what I would want you to do. Write down during the pause, our little intermission here, which is now, for about 10 minutes, write down this address. Send these guys a note. Demand that this level of honest imagery, of stunning stuff that should not be there, continue, and that ultimately they analyze and announce what this really is in a public forum. And you'll see some amazing things happen in the next few weeks, if in fact enough of us, like with the Enterprise, all get together and demand something from our governments, because the UK is involved as much as the United States. It's part of ESA, which is part of the project. See you shortly in part 2. provide us, and we actually had our marks, and we're totally late, so with that good news, let me find what it is. Okay, well that is prelude. What I see happening politically is that as the Vesta information proceeds, as NASA continues to give us better and better and clear images, they're even publishing tip images of the state. They've never done that before this earth. A tip image for those on computer geeks is an uncompressed image where what you see on the image is basically what's there. It's not JPEG, it's not got little jaggy, it's not got all kinds of little compression artifacts. A tip is the best public image version of data from NASA that you can get. They're publishing tips of these images. As I say up there, or I said, I'll pop it back up. If they continue doing what they're doing, which is showing us what's really there, there will come a point, and it's going to be probably weeks away, maybe a little longer, maybe a month or two, but it's in the foreseeable horizon now, where the Vesta data is so damn good that a bunch of honest mainstream guys in public are going to begin thinking and talking and speaking about the unthinkable. Otherwise, none of this is going to work. And at some point, a producer would see about Okay. At some point, that conversation is going to leak into ABC, CBS, NBC, and it's going to hit everyone in a mainstream network news story, which, as my friend Kevin Sanders used to say, is quickly then picked up by all the other guys and becomes the story of the day. I mean, you've seen this over and over and over again with the Casey Anthony trial, with the debt ceiling crisis, with, Representative Weiner, whatever is Weiner. All those stories, they act like a herd, like a flock. And all it takes is one of them to land on a story. And ancient ruins on an asteroid, totally unexpected by only the honest mainstream guys, is going to become a huge story, provided NASA continues to show us this honest imagery. And they don't freak out and something mysteriously suddenly happens to the spacecraft or whatever. Now, I'm betting that what we're seeing is not by accident. It's part of what they call in the intelligence community, soak time. The ability to basically move the conversation in the right direction, thank you, by showing data that is at some point irrefutable. So I would project politically that in the next few weeks or months, let's give it a couple of months, as this spacecraft continues to circle and spiral closer and closer, and the photos get better and better and better. Now, I believe that NASA is being mandated politically by some outside agency to finally tell us the truth. I don't think this is coming from inside NASA. Why don't I think that? Because they're doing everything they can not to give us live imagery. They have now thousands of images, this or better, in the bank. They've given us one image per week. And they're talking now in the mission when they get into orbit of giving us the next week or two, starting maybe the 11th of August, one image per day. But one image per day is like 1/1000th of the number of images they're going to be taking. Because the constraint to taking imagery has been you can't fire the engine and change the orbit and get in the right orbit and take pictures simultaneously. If you remember, the cameras are up on top, the engine is on the bottom, so if it's pointed in the right direction, the cameras are pointed in the wrong direction, et cetera, et cetera. So they've got to be in a stable orbit with the spacecraft flipped upside down, the cameras looking down to take the pictures. There's no reason why we should get one picture per day. And there is a mounting criticism, again, in the mainstream community. Hey guys, the rover guys at Mars are giving us live pictures, dozens per day. Why are you being so stingy? And you can all help. If you write this address and you demand more imagery, if you demand they do like the MER project, the Mars Exploration Rover project, or the Cassini mission to Saturn, where Carolyn Porco, who is a really big Star Trek fan and gets it, gave us live images, thousands upon thousands of images live, which allow talented amateurs, like at unmannedspaceflight.com, to massage them and put them in computers and tweak them and enhance them and companion them and composite them and put them into mosaics and all that, which is free labor to present what NASA is doing to the world for nothing. And if that can be encouraged by a bunch of people that are frankly acting like old fogies, like 30 years ago, where you had to physically go to a kiosk at some museum to see a handful of black and white pictures tacked up on the board, when now we have the internet and day or night 24/7, you can see anything going on anywhere on the planet. It's not appropriate to the 21st century, particularly given what's in these images. So that's the first thing you can do, is to make more data available. Demand of them more data availability, because the more data that's out there, the more likelihood that some producer, some reporter, some guy working for the New York Times is going to see stuff and go, holy cow, is that what I think it is? Like, I just had a guy come up to me and he said that this very strange object, let me back up, okay, back up.
Go forward one.
Hang on. This object looks to him like the Opera House in Australia, the Sydney Opera House, with the clamshell architecture. It's not a two-dimensional structure. In fact, we now have from the press conference a rotation movie that I did not have time to put into this because literally the news is breaking so fast, and Rob and I were on an airplane all night, and I obviously wouldn't have had time, given all the technical problems, and getting this again prepared for you now, to show it here, but there's several now new angles of this, at different sun angles and different viewing angles, and there's no question these are huge clamshells arching over this thing in 3 dimensions. That can't happen in nature, particularly on this scale. This thing is miles across. So what is it? As I said a moment ago, it looks like that. These are the guys that can tell us if we keep the system honest. This guy in particular can tell us, Chris Russell. They're at that address. Send them email. Bombard them. Inundate them with email. All my Facebook people, 20,000 people on my fan page alone, if every one of you sent an email, you would be astonished at what could happen. They would be terrified. Absolutely terrified that people are watching and are going to hold them accountable, if not here, then in some other country. Because we're not the only population in the West. There's China, there's Russia, there's, the lowlands, the highlands, there's Australia. There's a globe of people all connected in the new sphere, Théodet Chardin's famous phrase. Electronically, who can now peer over their shoulders, and what they're trying to do is drag their feet, those that know what's going on, because they don't want this to break, and it's got to break, and someone, I believe, is mandating that it break, and I think this is the guy. Because what was discussed around the State of the Union a few months ago was the idea of a Sputnik moment. The moment in the West, 40 plus years ago, when everything changed. And we suddenly were galvanized, particularly in the United States, because of competition from the Soviet Union to do what we had never done before, and to create the industrial infrastructure and the economics of the 21st century by means of Kennedy's valiant call to rise to the challenge, to undertake an enterprise mission, and to boldly seize the resources, the knowledge base of a solar system for the benefit of all mankind. That did not proceed to fruition because of other forces and agendas. It can now happen. Everything is in place. All that's required is the spark, the fuse being lit. And that fuse can be your emails to those people demanding the truth, such as we now will see in real time what this and a stunning number of other structures on this little place really turn out to be. Now, it's very interesting. The White House, as you know, puts out official press pictures of the president in various motifs and various locations and all that as part of the message of the day. Ronald Reagan started this. Obviously, this administration and others have continued it. And so whenever you see an official photograph of the president doing something, you have to ask yourself, what's he really doing? Why am I seeing this picture? What is it that someone wants me to see? Well, the day of Atlantis' final launch from the Cape, the president put out, through his press office, this picture. The president watching television, flat screen, showing different network coverage of the launch of Atlantis, and they put this flat screen in a specific location. Look at the location. Look where they positioned him. This is the president a few weeks earlier, where he had gone down to see the Endeavour launch, which did not take place. It was actually supposed to take place at 19.47 Greenwich Mean Time in Cape Canaveral, at the same time, the same day as the royal wedding here in Britain. And some very curious things went on around the launch, and it was postponed in ways that made me very, very suspicious, ways that never happened in the entire history of the space program before. But the president continued, landed in Air Force One, walked with his family under Atlantis, and actually got a tour of the final spaceship of the shuttle program prior to her final launch and return. And then they put out this photograph showing Atlantis leaving Earth for the last time under this painting, which is very symbolic to me, because what you see here is a different era. You see, remember, it was Kennedy who compared space flight to the new ocean. In fact, NASA actually put out a book called The New Ocean, describing Mercury, Gemini, and the beginnings of Apollo, based on his and Ted Sorensen, his brilliant, gifted speechwriters, capture of that phrase, space is the new ocean. Look at what Obama had himself photographed in front of. An ocean with a steam, primitive cargo vessel chugging along, like a different era. Like the image is supposed to convey, this represents this part of spaceflight, and something else, to pardon the expression, is dawning. Which brings us to this place. This is an artistic representation of a little moon called Phobos, which orbits Mars in 7 tetrahedral hours, 39 tetrahedral minutes. Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that. A moon which has become really exciting because with the Mars Express mission, the ESA mission that you guys are involved in, at least partly as part of the European Union, we've gotten some astonishing images of Phobos over the last few years. Images showing, oh my, what do we, more regular geometry. Except this appears, this object is only about 15 miles across. This geometry is visible in this stark form only on one side. On the other side, it seems to be covered up. Why is this side different from the other side? Because this side is the front. Phobos goes around Mars and orbits Mars in the same period of time that it takes to spin on its own axis because of something called tidal lock. It's in a tidal lock configuration. So like our own moon, it orbits around and keeps one side always facing Mars every 7 hours and 39 minutes. That's the side that I believe is scoured off by micrometeorite abrasion. It basically, the side that has no gravity, it's like a billionth of the Earth or something. So any particle that hits, ping, stuff flies off into space and doesn't stick and doesn't lie in the valleys and the bottoms or whatever, and mantle and cover and conceal what's underneath. Look at this astonishing rectilinear geometry. This is now a close-up. You can actually see that there are decks here. There's weird, long, lineal, this looks like a cable maybe. The scale of this is all very human. It's very terrestrial scaled. And if you do the comparison, this is a Mercator projection map of the weird lines, grooves, pattern. This is a nighttime satellite image taken from ISIS of the streetlights of Los Angeles. Geometry, geometry, geometry. This is the orthogonal geometry I keep talking about. Now notice that it varies depending upon how the architects had to change, but you have parallelisms. Again, it isn't that it's rigidly rectilinear, it's that it's quasi-rectilinear and has a coherent pattern, meaning a logical pattern. This geometry is incredibly analogous to this geometry, except of course this is on a little moon orbiting Mars, almost, 200 million miles away from the sun, 100 million and a half, and this of course is in the Los Angeles basin. But Carl's dictum prevails. Intelligent life on Earth first manifests itself in the geometric regularity of its constructions. Well, lo and behold, look who is trying in this image to get President Barack Obama really interested in Phobos. Buzz Aldrin, second man on the moon, flew with him to Cape Canaveral, where the president gave a speech in April of 2010, enunciating the new vision, where he talked about human American astronauts visiting an asteroid. Well, in the mainstream eyes, this object qualifies as a captured asteroid. At least that's been the model up till now. However, Buzz, during the anniversary ceremonies around the 40th anniversary of the Apollo 11 landing, a couple of years ago, and recently has been talking about something else on Phobos, which is tantalizingly intriguing because of what it tells me that Buzz really knows that he can't talk about yet, but its time and day is coming, and it is this. There is a monolith on Phobos. This is an artist rendition done by Fran Palermo, one of my colleagues. We worked many years ago on the seeps, the groundwater coming out of Mars in all kinds of places, particularly in two bilobe patterns indicative of Mars having two tidal oceans back when it was a moon circling Planet 5 before the damn thing blew up. This is an actual Mars surveyor shot showing the amazing geometry of a tall, this is almost as tall as the Washington Monument in D.C., 500 feet. It's obviously very, very broad at the top, and it appears to be, this is a very accurate reconstruction, which if I had the time I would have shown you all the geometry of the shadowing and the 3D CAD modeling and all that. This thing does not belong on Phobos, which should be a little battered rock smashed by meteor bombardment over billions and billions and billions of years. That's the standard model. Except that's not what's going on here. I think this is the place that Buzz would like to land, because suppose this is a new addition to an ancient Phobos. Suppose this was created by a previous high-tech civilization on Earth in one of the earlier epochs of the rise and fall of civilization we're going to talk about in a few minutes. And this, in fact, is the elevator, where you land on top, go in the door, go down inside to experience whatever wonders this Type 2 civilization have left for its great, 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 great descendants. And Aldrin knows this is true. Well, obviously, if you're a public speaker and you use a term like monolith, and you're Buzz Aldrin, and you have the synoptic vision of having actually walked on the surface of another celestial body, i.e. the moon, you don't use the word monolith in an era of Arthur and Stanley and 2001 by accident. This is another monolith, which existed in Arthur Clarke and Stanley Kubrick's vision of a seminal film that was supposed to define our universe, our world, our reality from 2000 on. Instead, something else horrific and tragic and awful happened, and it has taken center stage, and it has defined the last decade like none other. What was supposed to be a positive, elevated fork in the road for human evolution, in their vision, became a nightmare, where 2001 stands for one thing and one thing only. It stands for 9/11 and 3,000 people who lost their lives in places like New York, the Pentagon, and Pennsylvania, with lots and lots of copycats ever since. A decade of horror, the likes of which this planet, even in World War II, did not know. Because in World War II you had fronts, you had boundaries, you had rules. We've now been, for the last 10 years, subjected to conflict which seems to have no rules, which puts all of us at risk, or thinking we're at risk. So we have behaved like lemmings, like sheep, like terrified kids hiding under the bed, thinking, oh, it's going to happen to us. A mechanism of total psychological control, which at a crucial time in the physics, as I will lay out in a couple of minutes, took control of our mindset, our consciousness, our hopes and our dreams, dashed them in pieces, and left us with nothing to hang on to in the way of hope and change and a real future for 6.5 billion people on this planet, except endless privation, endless constrictors, endless lines of magnetometers extending from airplanes to boats and trains and even someday automobiles, where no place will be considered safe because of terrorists. It's a perfect mind, and I can't say the rest of the word on television. The counterpoint to that tragedy was my friend Arthur, who envisioned that the game changer, the thing that would transform humanity from one of want and privation and scarcity and fear, was something that would be found as nearby as the moon itself, a monolith. Something left by someone who cared enough to leave the very best. And in Arthur's vision, which was really the penultimate fruition of his vision from his first novels through the films to his last films and his last writings, he's had one overarching message, which I've been thinking about very much for the last several weeks as I've been getting ready to do this, and I realized that Arthur's entire life was a message about what is coming of this time and what can happen, which can change negativity into something so incredibly transformative and positive that it is, in fact, what is driving the stunning and startling pushback, the fear-mongering going on all over the world, particularly on the internet, about something way out there in the dark called Elanine, which I'll get to momentarily. But if we were to extend Arthur's vision past the moon, the first place, of course, would be Mars. And when I got into the Mars work decades ago, I wrote a whole book, The Monuments of Mars, which turns out to be a tour de force of Arthur's vision, because Sidonia, the mathematics, the geometry, the implied storyline behind the face, and the idea of some kind of intervention into this nursery that led to us, that's all there in reality on Mars, and it has been hushed up and covered up by NASA and the other space agencies because, in the words of Tom Cruise and John Nicholson, not John, Jack, we can't handle the truth. That's their perception. It's time to show them they're wrong. Brookings said we can't handle the truth. It's been the excuse. It's been the facile lie. It's been the peach basket over the really good stuff they've been using for decades to keep us from the good stuff. Well, the more I look into what Arthur was trying in his meta-vision to tell us through all these various art forms, the novels, the films, his nonfiction, his fiction, the conversations that he and I had, even the last emails that he sent that Robin actually had read, the more I came to realize that this was Arthur's meta-message. Did you know that the original monolith was supposed to be a damn tetrahedron? This is a work of art by MGM, by the art department. This is the Discovery spacecraft. Discovery spacecraft, Discovery space shuttle. That's interesting. And this is the monolith orbiting Jupiter, where, of course, he was supposed to go. But Kubrick couldn't do it in the film because it was too hard to make the rings? No, it wasn't time to really show what Iapetus is really like. And you all know, because I know a number of you have been coming up to me and saying, when is part 7 going to be out? Well, hopefully in the next few weeks I will have peace and quiet, really. At some point, part 7 will be done because we've now got the data to blow the rest of your socks off. You cannot make any wine before it's time. You have got to be able to basically put the pieces together in a way that's coherent and makes sense and is logical and is defensible, and you can't do that until you get the data. Well, NASA finally, a couple, 3 years ago, gave us the last pieces I needed to finish the series. But again, there's also a political timing. If you, to mix our metaphors madly, and to quote from Jesus, if you throw your seed on barren ground, nothing's going to grow. But in this environment now, with images of Vesta showing up that are stunning, even if you don't know what you're looking at, it is now time to show the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey used to say, and so the time for Iapetus Part 7, tetrahedrally Part 7, has come. And I promise I will do that hopefully before the end of the year. Maybe a lot before the end of the year. You know, part of it has to do with inspiration. And boy, are we inspired, as you're going to see. There's amazing things happening. Well, why is Arthur's use of a tetrahedron as the monolith, as the teaching tool, as the iconic technology from this super Type 2 civilization that reached into the earthly cradle and basically created humankind in his vision 4 million years ago? How is it related to our work? Well, this is the 27 lines of the cubic surface, the foundations of hyperdimensional physics. This is how it manifests inside a rotating planetary sphere, 2 entwined tetrahedra showing 19.5 north and south energy upwellings. You then look to the solar system and you find all kinds of real-world examples. This is a Voyager shot from back in the 1970s showing that the Great Red Spot, this whirling vorticular maelstrom, which has been going and going and going for 300 years like the Energizer Bunny, and none of the mainstream guys can figure out how a hurricane on Jupiter, which is farther from the sun and gets less energy, can keep going this long. Well, of course, it's not being fueled by the sun. It's being fueled by hyperdimensional release of energy in the core of Jupiter, radiating out, which they finally had to grudgingly admit was confirmed by the Galileo mission a couple of decades ago. But they don't yet know what's really driving, at least they don't yet publicly know. In this whole conversation, you have to continually keep reminding people there's a private conversation and a public conversation. And what they talk about in public is not the same thing they talk about when they're with each other and there's nobody listening. Or as my friend Jerry Glenn used to say, you have to be careful lest in-house language become out-house language. And that shows you what they think of us. So this is the geometry of the inscribed tetrahedron, showing put one tip on the poles, you get latitude points at 19.5, actually 19.47. If you spin it upside down, you get it on the other hemisphere. The Jovian red spot is in fact at the vortex tip of one of these circumscribed force vibrating field patterns inside spinning Jupiter that shows up exquisitely as a perennial vortex being fueled by literal hyperspatial energies ducted into our 3D reality from a higher dimensional state space, i.e. another parallel reality, i.e. the matrix in which our reality is floating, is composed, is renewed, as they said in Forbidden Planet, microsecond to microsecond to microsecond. And again, this is the geometry. The key number to remember here, which is kind of like a code, it's like shorthand. Remember the old joke about the 2 guys who are in prison? And one guy, he's a new guy, and he comes in, and there's a whole bunch of guys in the mess hall, and they're sitting around, and they've had, dinner or whatever they call it, and they're basically waiting to go back to their cells. So what do? They tell stories and they tell jokes. And one guy says, 42, and everybody erupts into laughter. And another guy says, 37, and another guy, what the hell's going on? Oh, well, we heard the joke so many times we don't need to tell the joke, we just told the number, and everybody knows what it's about. That's what 19.5 is. It's a code. It's the code that lets you know they're talking about hyperdimensional physics with all its manifestations, all its implications, all its amazing multi-dimensional reality implications. 19.5. And there are various variants of it, like 33 is related. I don't have time to tell you how, but it's in Dark Mission. It's on the web. Just go look. 11. Or 1111 is another. It's a code for 19.5. So whenever you start seeing these numbers in connection with events, given how ritually bound NASA is, they're talking about hyperdimensional physics. I mean, for God's sake, the first spacecraft we sent to Mars to land, little Pathfinder, the microwave oven-sized little robot with the wheels that went and looked at this and looked at this, and it went and landed at 19.5 degrees on Mars inside a tetrahedron. They're telling everybody publicly, but of course, unless you follow the real stuff, the real work, the real code breaking, you don't have a clue. Because if you read Enterprise, you read Dark Mission or Monuments of Mars, yes, you will have clues, lots of them. So, getting back to Arthur's monolith. I mean, this was such an amazing breakthrough when I realized what he was doing. According to the story reported in 71 in the book about the making of 2001, I forget, it was a Dell paperback and I forget who wrote it, but it's very insightful. I would find it on Amazon or eBay or some used bookstore. Go find the making of 2001 and read with these sets of glasses. You'll be astonished at what you're going to learn. Because Kubrick says in there, the same Kubrick, by the way, in his Playboy interview, who could give chapter and verse about Brookings, back when nobody, including me, had a clue about what the Brookings report was really trying to tell us, he knew it by heart. Why? Because he and Arthur and several others I could name, by a time, are part of an in crowd. They're part of I don't want to say priesthood. I now know that Gene was one. I know that Isaac was one. I know Bob Heinlein was one. All the guys I grew up idolizing because I was a kid, teenager, reading science fiction. And then one of the wonders, I actually got to work with them. We became friends. And I had no idea they had these private, secret lives that they were leading, that their stuff that we were all reading and lapping up and thinking about was in fact part of a plan to lay out a vision for the future where humans could be human again and get out of this primeval morass, this swamp that someone is trying to push our face down into the mud and keep us there, and we must break out of prison, otherwise the future is without hope. And in the next few weeks, we have what we had at that moment when we were able to name Enterprise. We have a window of opportunity where if enough of our voices connected by Facebook and Twitter and the other media all get together and in unison demand that what's being shown on television and on these computer images actually be made present in the world, the so-called real world, the mainstream world of CNN and Fox and MSNBC and ABC and CBS and the Wall Street Journal and Murdoch, etc. If we demand to be made public, we have a shot at changing the river, because what's coming, and I'll show you in a minute what's coming, is so potentially transformative and has been anticipated for so long that, as my mother used to say about the relationship between my father and her, the last for which the first was made. We can do this, but we have to realize that we're running out of time, and we have to be serious, and if we do it all together, we can win, because there's so much more of us than them. And obviously somebody is helping. Otherwise, why would we have these images? So I looked at this dimensions of the monolith, and I looked at this geometry. Now notice the difference between this one and the previous one. I'll go forward here. There are circumscribed tetrahedra, meaning a sphere with the tetrahedron inside it. Then there's superscribed tetrahedron, where the sphere is on the outside and the planet or the ball of the sphere is on the inside. And there's a mathematical relationship, and I won't bore you with the details. It's all here, and it's on the website, and just Google, Enterprise and Arthur Clarke and the geometry of the monolith, and you'll find it. Bottom line, the mathematics of the monolith are in fact an elegant tetrahedral coding of the mathematics of the circumscribed tetrahedron, which is the code to the gating between dimensions of energy and information, and obviously us. Consciousness is not just a 3D phenomenon. We are beings that live other places simultaneously, and in dreams, in that state, we are somehow able to communicate with our, coining a term, higher selves. Why higher? Because it's a higher dimensional state space. That's all it means. It's a more complexified reality in a higher dimension. Bottom line, the 1 by 4 by 9, the squares of 1 and 2 and 3, is in fact another code for a tetrahedron in 3D, which is a gate significator between dimensions, for energy flow between dimensions, a hyperdimensional code for that reality that transfers between dimensions. The monolith, which was made to look like a door, a 1 by 4 by 9 door, is in fact a metaphor for a door between dimensions. So with this I realized Arthur knew. There's no way we never had this conversation in words because it was not time. It was not allowed. Now it comes to this bizarre thing coming out of the dark, which has occasioned such inordinate fear and loathing and pushback and all kinds of absurd and obscene fear porn all over the internet. The coming of Elohim, the destroyer, the thing that's going to smash the earth, Nibiru, dwarf planets, invisible moons, you name it, every conceivable lie about this little object is out there. All about an object which is, under normal circumstances, just one of 100 of these type objects that come through the inner solar system every year. Yet somehow this object has been fastened upon by every fear-monger on the planet, all of which seem to have very, very lucrative YouTube accounts. And it's out there that we should fear and loathe and run like hell, and there's no place to run to anyway, so it's all over. The end is here. It's the end time. It's the end of life. It's the end of the planet. And I looked at this and I said, what the hell is going on? What could it be about this little thing, this little birdie bit, which is like 100 others that come through the inner solar system every year that nobody cares about except for astronomers that kind of track these things? Because if you spot a comet, everybody has an ego, right? You get to name it after yourself. So one thing on the planet that you get to name after yourself by planetary acclamation, by the rules, by a coordinated consensus of the guys that do this stuff, and is recognized anywhere on the planet. Oh, that's comet Elohim, named after Leonid Elohim, who, yes, is a real guy. This is Leonid Elohim on Moscow television. He's a young guy. He's only in his 30s. Back when he was around 10 or so, he got really zapped by astronomy like I did. And he didn't get a telescope because he was poor. A lot of Russians are very poor. Most still are very poor. So he didn't get a telescope until, a few years ago. And he didn't discover his comet with his own telescope because of the era of the internet. He was able to go to the internet and, by means of an electronic connection from his laptop in his little apartment in Moscow, all the way halfway around the world to a place called Mary Hill, New Mexico, he was able to rent time on a telescope and run it, operated by remote control from Moscow. And here he is with a Moscow TV guy, who is even younger than he is, showing on his laptop one of the images of what he found in December of 2010. December 10th, 2010. Using this telescope. This is an 18-inch measures the diameter of the mirror. Obviously, it's longer because you have to bring it to a focal length and put detectors and CCD cameras and all that. It sits in a shed, in a wood shed, and it's operated by remote control. So you can literally, with a telescope, you can punch, keys and open the motors, the roof, point the telescope, take images, load them down to the computer, which is located somewhere on the side. You're not seeing all the cables here. And then literally via the internet, ship those images, digital images at the speed of light, back to Moscow. And lo and behold, this is what Eleanine saw. This little fuzzy twink. Now, the dots represent images of stars. Why are they separate images? Which, of course, the fear-mongering crowd said, oh, those are super spaceships coming to eat the Earth. No, those are time-lapse images, 4 of them, representing the rotation of the Earth in the time that the telescope was taking these pictures. And what you do is you superimpose the comet image on image on image to stack. It's called image stacking, to drive down the noise and drive up the signal. And in that period of time, of course, the sky moves. So the stars, because the comet is moving separate from the stars. The comet is orbiting. It's moving through space. Even in the couple hours where he took the images, it had moved, even at the distance of halfway to Jupiter, which is how far out it was when it was photographed by Eleanine. It had moved so that the stars appear as 4 separate images, whereas the comet appears as the little fuzzy ball it is. And at this distance, the coma, or the fuzz, the gas is escaping from whatever this thing is. And I say whatever, because it's not a normal comet, as I will show you very shortly. They're what escape and cause light scattering, so you have a bright object that is basically shining by reflected sunlight. And the size of this coma, even when he first photographed it in December of last year, was bigger than the size of Jupiter, over 80,000 miles across. Now, that's not the object inside, which he estimates based on comet models, which, of course, I think are useless in this case, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that you're not seeing the real object, what we call the nucleus in cometary paleontology and nomenclature. But you're seeing the fuzzball, the coma of escaping gases. Now, at the moment, we don't know what those gases are. We're hoping, because a few days ago, this comet went within 4.5 million miles of Stereo B, which is a NASA satellite. I'll show you that in a minute. And they got very good spectral information, and so we should get composition data as to what is being emitted by this object. That could tell us a lot more, depending upon whether this is being deliberately released to, shall we say, give a signature that would provide some people with clues as to what it really is. But back to the fear porn mongers, this is what they made out of Leonid Eleanine. They turned his name into, a catchphrase. It's Extinction Level Event, which came of course, from the movie Deep Impact. Or it's Nibble in November, which is the code name for the planet that Sitchin has been talking about for decades. And people are, the YouTube nonsense is so incredibly pervasive. I began looking at this and I said, okay, there's got to be a political reason for this overwhelming fear porn to counter something. In mainstream politics, you don't see this kind of a campaign unless somebody's trying to convince a group of people to think one way when in fact they're thinking another way. And there's like a moment where you can seize their consciousness, their attention, and divert it, like 9/11. 9/11 was a classic example of taking something that Arthur and Stanley had painted as a stunning potential breakthrough for human consciousness and turn it into something of fear and loathing and dread and a nightmare for the last 10 years, where we are sick to death of discussions of terrorists and terrorism and bombs and lines and magnetometers and scans and all that crap. Someone took control of the conversation and have dictated our reality for 10 years, an entire decade. Now we're coming up to another possibility for changing the conversation, and somebody is even more aggressively determined not to allow us to breathe, or to think, or to dream, or to look at other possibilities, but to inculcate overwhelming fear against something. And my logic says, if there's that much energy being devoted to the dark side, maybe, just maybe, what's coming is the light side. And the dark side is in fear and is desperately trying a last-ditch rearguard effort to keep us in chains, in prison, to keep us constrained. In other words, this is a war for our hearts and minds and souls about what might be possible, what could happen in the next few months, which is going to be antithetical to all the absurd nonsense going on, up to and including the nonsense going on in Washington, which has become even a joke to people who never pay attention to politics, with words like ridiculous, bullshit, etc., etc. People who would never get caught, getting actively involved in politics or looking at this and saying, this is nuts. This is not what the Founding Fathers envisioned. This is not thinking of people and the country and consensus and the betterment of humankind, the betterment of the majority of people. It's basically about ego and posturing and the next election. And as I've said over and over again, the physics, the hyperdimensional physics, as it keeps changing, is mandating that the polarization we're seeing get worse and worse and worse and worse. So, to use a kind of a catchphrase, the good are getting better and the bad are getting worse. And it's so obvious now which is which. It doesn't take a scorecard. I mean, The Lie is like a Jim Carrey movie, Liar, which was brilliant. We're seeing it on television. The liars can't lie. The lies keep falling apart. And the games, even though they're more complex, it's clear that there are games going on, to where even people who would never imagine conspiracies or that there'd be hidden agendas or people doing things beyond what you can read in the headlines or see on the evening news, they're beginning to realize it's all a game, and the game has nothing to do with all the rest of this. It's all about them. And that's when things can change. As Robert was out the other night proving by handing out flyers, not anonymous, in weird downtown Albuquerque, which after dark you don't want to kind of hang around, except the good news is there's a cop on every corner. So the fear porn around Elanine is that something like this, something smashing into the earth with a devastating energy of 1,000 H-bombs or something is going to be coming along in the tail of this thing. The outrageous claims with zero evidence, or Nibiru, horrifying after 2012, exclusive by this turkey, whoever that turkey is. Okay? Or this is a frame grab from Deep Impact, showing what would happen with a huge tidal wave created by a 6-mile wide object smashing into the Atlantic Ocean, and then that final scene where she and her father, played by Omar Sharif, are standing there on the beach, and the wave is coming toward them, and of course, further up the coast, you have this, which is the wave inundating New York, skyscrapers tipping over. Fear, 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 fear porn. What is all this about? I think this is laying the groundwork for when Elanine becomes the worst kept secret on the planet. All it's going to take now is one serious story, either in CNN or ABC, or it doesn't matter who, because everybody else would immediately go on to the serious story. And then what will people do? Millions of people who would never be caught dead sitting here listening to me rant and rave and ramble on. They will rush to this thing, their computer. They will Google. Google is suddenly their best friend. Fearfully impelled because they've heard awful things, they will Google, and they will come up with Google searches that go on for page after page after page with this kind of fear porn. And it's all, if I'm right, by design. Someone is laying groundwork for when this cannot be kept secret, and this will be what they will be told in multiple ways, by multiple sources, by multiple nitwits who have nothing better to do than to spread it, and I don't think all of them are amateurs. I think it's being manufactured and controlled. It is a campaign that's being funded because it's designed to completely saturate the search engines. So when someone Googles Elanine, they will get the worst of the worst, and they'll run screaming into the night and try to, like in Orson Welles and War of the Worlds back in the 30s, they'll try to hit for high ground because they will see these images and it will be real to them because it will be on YouTube, which is the equivalent of my friend Gene Roddenberry's prescription, Dick, if it's real, it will be on television. The internet is now right up there with television. Again, all because of this little thing way out there in the dark, which is a fraction of the size of this city. It's 2 miles across, maybe. Frankly, I think it's a lot smaller and a lot more interesting, but be that as it may. Now, it was all of this and the political analysis I've just gone through that made me say, look, if there's all this humongous effort to get us to run screaming at the words Elamine, what is someone trying to conceal? And is there any clue in the published data that would tell us what the agenda might be? So I turned to the public data source, which is this source. This is the small body database browser at JPL. Someone said, oh, come on, Holly, you're trusting the government? Yes, and this is why. Because NASA does not manufacture this data. NASA is a clearinghouse of this data. If you look carefully over here, let me see if I can show you. This data has been compiled as of this date. This was on the 29th of July. Over 2,200 separate observations from all over the planet by all kinds of amateurs like Elamine. Only these guys, a lot of them have their own telescopes, or they're renting time like at Mary Hill, etc. Or they have friends at telescopes and they've got the camera expertise, and some guys got a computer expertise. They put all their expertise together, and it's like they're out there taking pictures, and they send this data to NASA and to Harvard, to the small body group at Harvard, where my friend Brian Marsden used to run it until he ceremoniously up and died a few years ago. And now, of course, I don't have Marsden to talk to about this. He would have some very interesting things to say, because we all lived through the Hale-Bopp fiasco. And I'm now beginning to wonder about Hale-Bopp. Was Hale-Bopp another manufactured incident so people can use that as the model of what's coming? And they'll immediately go to the fear porn part, the 39 people who died. Didn't anybody ever kind of wonder why it was 39? Which is twice 19.5. And Applewhite was CIA. We know that. Is it possible that Hale-Bopp was kind of like New Haven? Now, you have no idea here what I mean when I say New Haven. In the States, we have Broadway plays. Broadway plays need places to be bad, to test out ideas that don't work, playwrights that are lousy, that suck. It used to be that playwrights and backers would try out a play with sets and costumes and everything, the big deal, but they do it in a little town outside of New York in Connecticut called New Haven, where Yale University is located. If it worked in New Haven, then you brought it to Broadway. You brought it into New York, the big time. Was Hale-Bopp the New Haven of fear porn for Elamine? One question that I don't have an answer to, but I'm thinking that it certainly fits the pattern. So I'm looking at this data, and I'm starting to see, well, this is kind of weird, because there's all kinds of indications from the numbers that Elamine is not, in fact, a random natural incident. Like, down here at the bottom, close approach to Earth. We got a whole series of numbers. I'm going to enlarge this so you can easily see it. Look at this number right here. On the 16th of October, a few months from now, at 1951 hours, Greenwich Mean Time, 19.5, Elamine zips closest to the Earth at 22 million miles. 19.5? Wait a minute, what are the odds of that? Statistically, how can that happen? You've got a little birdie bit orbiting the sun. It could be in any orbit, any inclination, any distance and all that, and it's supposed to arrive closest to the Earth at a 19.5 moment in time? That's pretty bizarre. So I started trying to model how one would do a calculation to estimate the odds of that happening just by accident. This is what you do. You take 24 hours in a day times 60 minutes. In other words, that gives you the moment, the probability of any 1 hour and minute that this thing would come by. And the odds are like over 1,000 to 1 against that being just chance. Now, if I had 1,000 to 1 odds in my favor and I went to Vegas, Robin and I would never have to work again. Of course, I would anyway, at least that's what she says. But it would be pretty cool if you knew anything you were doing, you had 1,000 to 1 odds that you would succeed. You know, meet somebody, 1,000 to 1 odds, they'll, you know, go home with you that night. Hey, I'll take those odds. 1,000 to 1 odds, you go see a new car and you're going to wind up driving away with it and not have to pay anything down. I mean, 1,000 to 1, and I'm underestimating deliberately, okay? If you had 1,000 to 1 consistently in your favor, you would own the world. The first number, this thing comes by Eleni, so, you know, it was like old, you know, Art's New Year's predictions. Ding, 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 ding. This, numerically, is not an ordinary kind of object. Because that number is this number. We now have attached, with odds of 1440 to 1, a hyperdimensional signature to this object. So I thought, okay, let's look further. Oh, it didn't take, I mean, Google is your friend. It took literally 10 seconds. Like, here is from the Minor Planet Center at Harvard, where Brian Marsden used to run, back when I was, you know, running uptown and we were good friends. It lists Eleni's initial discovery plates and how bright the comet was on those photographs I showed you. And for those of you who can't see this, it was 19.5 magnitude. Now, come on. Give me a break. That's not possible. That tells me several interesting things. That Leonid Eleni could not have just randomly spotted this object, which, remember, swings by the Earth at 19.5 Greenwich Mean Time on the 16th. Could not have done it randomly and had his discovery images see it when it was, I mean, 19.5 magnitude is very, 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 very dim. It's like over 1 million times dimmer than you can see with the unaided human eye. So, okay, what are the odds that those two numbers are just chance? Well, we can calculate. I mean, here you've got this little birdie thing way up, and this is Comet McMillan, okay, just to show you the splendor and the vastness of the universe. Think big, think really, 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 really big, and I'm going to show you some other clues so you can actually put this in perspective. The odds of this all going on just because it had nothing better to do and decided all by itself, no. Little Eleni is coming at us from a discovery moment in time when it was at 19.5 magnitude to swing past the Earth exactly when it's 19.5 Greenwich time. So, you take the brightest comet ever seen in modern history, which was a Kawasaki. The magnitudes are plus and minus. Minus is very bright, plus is dimmer. So Venus is like -4 when it's really kind of close. The moon is -12.6. The sun on this scale is -26, almost -27. So it's a logarithmic scale, and it's used by astronomers, amateurs, and professionals all over the world. Has been for centuries. The dimmest object seen was Halley, because we know exactly where it is, plotting in orbit, seen by Hubble a few months ago at +28.2. So the spread between those two is a range of 45.2 magnitude. I could have expanded the scale. I could have said the dimmest object one's ever seen and the brightest object one's ever seen. I could have cheated and used that, but I stuck with just common observations to try to limit the numbers so it's realistic. It makes sense. That spread is 45. So the odds of 19.5 coming up on discovery is like 1 in 45, right? But odds, you don't add odds, you multiply odds. Multiply. So you have to take the previous odds, and you now multiply them by this set of odds, and you do it this way. 24 hours times 60 minutes, 1440, times 45.2 gives you now 65,000 plus to 1 that Eleni is doing this by chance. 65,000. That means you'd have to discover a comet 65,000 times just to get one that would do this. That's more comets that have been discovered in the entire history of astronomy, right there. 65,000 comets have not been discovered. by any astronomers, any institutions, any observatories, any government agencies in the history of astronomy, going back hundreds of years. Just not that many comets have been discovered. But, as they say in the old radio ads, there's more. So you do this. You start looking now at the JPL applet. JPL is a really cool applet on its website that allows you to play around with the trajectory of any of these objects, comets, asteroids, whatever. You can play it on your computer, you can tilt it, you can look at various angles, move it around the solar system, look at it from this angle, look at it from the top down, from the bottom up, you know. So you look at this trajectory, and at the moment that Elanine